Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank Podcast. I'm here with Greg.
Hey, what's up, Rob?
Greg, all right. Now, you're probably the first time this has ever happened, but surgery, what happened? Can I guess? Can we play guess what surgery you had? Can I guess?
Yeah, you want me to do something fun, like give you symptoms?
Yeah, give me some symptoms.
Okay, I was pretty fucked up.
All right. So you're pretty fucked up. Is that a symptom or is that just the effect here?
Okay, well, if I give you symptoms, well, I don't know. You're kind of a young guy, so this is something that happens to older. It actually happens. I'm
Hemorrhoids.
50. Huh?
Hemorrhoids.
No, not hemorrhoids.
Okay.
God, that'd be fun.
I had those. Those aren't fun.
Oh, well, it'd be fun compared to what happened. You had those? You didn't have to have surgery for that, did you?
No, they went away after like sitting on a donut for a very long period of time. But those are not fun when people are like, "What's wrong with you?" I'm like, just nobody. Like, and this happened to be the I guess around the time it was a couple of years ago. I don't know why. Like, the people I worked with, their whole thing was like patting you on the ass type deal. Like, you move out of the way, like that type of thing. I'm like, fuck off. Like, don't touch me. We were gonna get into a fist fight. Like that amount of pain. I don't know. It's something where it's like, why are you sitting funny? It's like, I'm not sitting funny. You're sitting funny. It's like, you're not even sitting. You're hovering above your chair. Do you have
Yeah.
do you have a problem down there? I'm like, yeah, I do have a problem, and I don't feel like explaining it.
I've had that before too, man. I know what that's like. That's not fun at all.
Okay, what's the surgery for? Gallbladder?
Oh, okay. I'll just tell you. So I've got a condition called atrial fibrillation. I don't know if you've heard of that before.
Never.
Atrial fibrillation. It involves your heart. So what happens is it sounds scarier than what it really is. So there's two things that can go wrong with your heart. One's like an electrical thing, and one's a plumbing thing. The plumbing thing is something like heart attack, or you got valve problems, something's not going right. Electrical is like there's a difference between a heart attack and a cardiac arrest.
Yeah.
I've never had either one of those things, but a cardiac arrest is an arrhythmia problem. It's your electrical system's all fucked up. So basically, what you have, everyone has in their heart, is a natural pacemaker. It's an electrical input that's just setting a pretty consistent tone, right?
Yeah.
And if you have AFib, that signal's getting split up and divided, and it can be coming from different sources, and it gets into your heart's natural pacemaker, and it's zapping it, like it's flailing around in there, and it causes your upper atria to quiver. So the upper atria quivers around, and the lower ventricles are trying to keep pace. So it causes an erratic arrhythmia. Basically, the danger of something like that is the blood can, since your heart is not pumping effectively, and typically these are kind of short episodes. It could last, half an hour to like 6 hours or something like that. And the blood can pool in your atria, and if it pools, it can cause clots. And if you get a clot, it can cause a stroke. So that's a problem. You don't want that.
Yeah, you don't want to die or
So
anything.
yeah, you don't want to die. You don't want to
That'd
die
be a
from a stroke.
bummer on like a Tuesday if you die.
That
God.
would suck. Yeah, that would suck. So what they do to try and correct a problem like that is they try medicine to pop you out of AFib. If I'm like on the younger side of someone to have this, even though I'm 50, it's still kind of young to have this, and my heart's in really good shape. I've exercised my whole life, so I don't have an issue with the muscle of my heart or any of the structure of my heart. It's just the electrical part. So they tried medicine, and every once in a while I'd still have episodes. So they did something called an ablation, a catheter ablation, where they go in through your groin. Yeah, well, they knock you out first, thank God. They go in through your groin, and then they kind of map your heart, and they scar different parts of your heart, like where those signals are coming in. They actually set the AFib for you while you're on the table, and they find out where it's coming from, and they try and scar it up, and or they burn it, and then it's supposed to form a scar, and that way the signals can't come in, and you should be in a regular, what they call, sinus rhythm. So I had this procedure like a year and a half ago, but my heart is too young and too healthy, and it ended up healing itself. And because it healed itself, it started letting the signals in again. So the doctor's kind of optimistic this time it'll work, because he kind of just did it a little bit. He fucking went for it, man. He scarred the shit out of it. So
That's
really,
not a positive thing you want to hear. Is like he scarred the shit out of my heart. I'm like, that's like a Pat Benatar song on like if she just got really coked up and started tossing out lyrics, and instead of hit me with your best shot or whatever it is, shot through the heart, it's like, no, we're gonna do a scar your heart.
yeah, exactly. It's the shittiest song ever, right? Like it's scary as fuck.
Oh my
I'm gonna
god, dude.
change my I'm gonna change my speakers really quickly because yeah, I'm good.
I think we all just expect life to really work out and just all of it hold together until we like get in our 90s and then we give it kind of like, okay, you can start falling apart now. But really it's so fragile. Like you'd be surprised. Like, I mean, so like for instance, like with me, I eat so many cans of tuna a day. Like I eat one a day, but I've just done that as my only meal besides like maybe a chicken or something. But I've eaten it so much that I've gotten mercury poisoning. So I was in my doctor's office and he's like, you got mercury poisoning. I was like, so what are the side effects to that? Like, is it anything I should worry about? He goes, depression. I'm like, got that, dude. Mark that off the list. And he's like,
Yeah.
sudden hair loss. I'm like, I'm good, man. I was like, actually, besides, I just had my haircut cut the other day and the woman was going through my hair. She goes, you have gray hairs. And I'm like, what is that? What do you mean gray hairs? And she's like, "Yeah, you have like a lot of gray hairs. Like I can pluck them out if you want." And I'm like, Why would I have gray hair?" She goes, "It could just be a genetic thing." I'm like, "Nobody in my family has gray hairs except my grandfather, who's like 70 something." So she was like, "Then it could be a stress thing." And I'm like, "What the fuck am I stressed about?" And I went to my doctor, and he's like, "Yeah." He goes, "You suffer from depression. You're probably stressed all the time." And I'm like, but what am I stressed about? I don't feel stressed. He goes, you seem pretty tense. And I'm like, I'm not. You telling me I'm tense is making me tense. Like
Right.
and then so back to the mercury thing. He was asking me like depression, check, hair loss. I wasn't losing hair, but hair's been going gray. And then he goes, temperature, like, are you cold? And I was like, yeah, actually at my work, we have a temperature gun. And I
Yeah.
temperatured my fingers because my fingers were just going purple in the middle of the day. And I was like, what the hell is happening? Yo, 54 was the degrees on my fingers, 62 on my hands, my palms, and then my inner like temperature here was like in its 80s. And I was like, so
What?
what is that? And I told him about that. He goes, "Oh, so mercury poisoning is also an iron issue as well. So you have low iron in your blood. So what's happening is your circulation can't reach your fingertips and your toes." He goes, "Do your feet ever feel like you're like standing in snow?" And I'm like, "Yeah, they'll go numb sometimes." He goes, "Yeah, so instead of your body routing it to your fingers and all your extra, since it's so far away from where your heart is, it's trying to keep all your vital organs safe. So it's trying to keep the temperature there and keep them warm and flowing because you can lose your fingers and toes, but if you lose your heart, it's kind of the whole kit and caboodle." And I was like, so what's the fix? And he's like, well, you could stop eating tuna. You could take an iron supplement. I'm like, stop eating tuna. I was like, yeah, how much tuna is? He goes, yeah, it's like 70 cents, I think, a can, 60 cents a can. And I'm like, yeah. I was like, I don't have that much money and that's very cheap for a meal. And he goes, yeah, but what's more important, your life or a meal? And I'm like, you don't know me. Like I'm fucking cheap as shit. $5 on a t-shirt is too much. I was like, I'll stick with the tuna. He goes, yeah, but this is just gonna get worse. You could just stop for like a year and your body would return to normal. And I'm like, yeah, I like your advice, but just like every other advice, I'm just gonna do the opposite and see what happens.
Well, it sounds to me like for sure you suffer from the depression part and not anxiety. Because I've had like lifelong anxiety issues, man, and my whole thing is fucking paranoid and anything a doctor tells me, I'm like, "Oh man, I better listen to that. And I'm going to follow whatever advice that is."
I always just like because I'll be on like I'll like Google something and I'm like looking through and I'm just seeing all like the okay, well, I have that, but I don't have this. I have that, but I don't have this. So it's not that, not this, not that. And then someone's like, you're diagnosing yourself. I'm like, I'm not diagnosing myself. If my fucking foot is numb, I'm looking at what that is. Sorry, first one is obviously going to be diabetes because somehow it always links to losing one of your fucking feet. I'm reading it and I'm
Right.
like, yeah, but I don't have any of these crashes that it's telling me. So it's not that. And I toss it out and I just keep going through. Or I went to my doctor and he was just like, what about your diet? I'm like, it's not my fucking diet. Like, it's not the food that I'm eating that's causing this issue. So it's not that, but I think it's another issue, like a muscle issue or an intestinal issue. And he starts going through, he goes, yeah, it looks like you're not absorbing enough nutrients. Like, it's just like not getting soaked in all the way. He goes, yeah, it's an intestinal. Good job. Good call. Good call. Well, I'm going to prescribe you for this. I'm like, so I fucking, you didn't do any of the work. Like, Where's the
Yeah,
blood
right.
tests? Where's the other shit that's supposed to happen that makes you be a doctor? It's why you get the lab coat. I want to be poked, prodded. I want something to come in with a machine. You put my hand into the machine. It tells me if I'm, straight, if I'm gay, if I'm 87 years old and Chinese. I want all that stuff happening into the room or whatever. And he's like, I don't know what shows you're watching, but we don't do that here.
Yeah, it's pretty funny, man. Well, I mean, it just depends, like how badly you're worried about all this stuff happening. But it sounds like if you're going on online and checking out different ways that you're dying, it's not the most fun way to spend an evening.
First of all, that's how I like to live my Saturday nights. I ate 2 boxes of Raisin Bran one time and I hit Google and it said WebMD. And the first result was I have stomach cancer because I hadn't gone to the bathroom in a while and I felt like crap. They're like, stomach cancer. I'm like, so every time I see Raisin Bran, I'm like, yeah, 2 boxes of you equals like stomach cancer.
Yeah, nice. Oh man, that's crazy.
It's,
Have you been clinically diagnosed as depressed, or you're just kind of self-diagnosed?
So I have been. I take the test because now when you go into a doctor's office, they give you a scale rating of like 25. Like it's like a 1 to 5 type ratio. They ask you a list of questions. I scored a 24 out of 25, but I always knew because like shit that goes on in my head. I like look at people that tweet at me and stuff like horrible comments. I'm like, you guys ain't even close to the bastard that's up here. And so I had a new doctor and me and her were
Yeah.
talking, but she was like overseas style doctor. Like she just, I guess she was new. She's from a foreign country. She was, I guess, she just moved here in our, at least in our neighborhood for like the past, like, I think she's been living here for a couple months now. So she didn't
Yeah.
know me. She didn't know my personality. I'm the type of guy that when I was picking out my doctor, I asked who had the softest hands. And then the one lady's like, oh, this one. And I met him and I shook his hand and I was like, yeah, you do have soft hands. And he goes, you know what? Before like I even knew who you were, I thought that was weird that the nurse told me you said that. But now meeting you, I get it. And I think you're funny. And I'm like, thank you. See, you get my personality. I'm here to crack jokes. So they're giving me the depression test, this new doctor, because my other one was busy. And as we're going through the depression test and everything, I'm getting like a 5 out of 5, 5 out of 5. She goes, you know, you have severe depression. You ever been looked at for it? I was like, that's old shit. Like, I know I'm dealing with that. That's not what I'm here for.
Yeah.
I'm here because at this time I was experiencing an infection in my mouth. So my jaw was all swollen out. So I was like, I want to get this. I want to get an antibiotic for this. And if you look at like a couple, like maybe 100 episodes ago, you'll see I have a swollen jaw. But
Okay.
I was telling her, I was like, I'm not worried about that. She goes, but let me ask you one thing about your depression. Have you ever thought about hurting yourself? And I go, have I ever walked past the ceiling fan and wonder what happens if I jumped headfirst into it? Yeah, all the fucking time, but I don't do it. And it was a joke. You get it.
Right. Right. Yeah.
She
And you
did
left in
not
a
get
straitjacket.
she did not get that. She wrote up my like I took a screenshot of it. She wrote up my list after my meeting was like whatever patient experiences severe suicidal symptoms all day long and wonders what happens if he jumped into a ceiling fan threatening to hurt him. I'm like, whoa. I'm like, I read it and I was like, yo, if anybody reads this that's not me
Yeah.
is or
You're
wasn't in
right.
that room, it's going to be like, yo, he's a psychopath. But I told her she got it eventually. My doctor read it and was like, did Robbie say that or did he say it like this? And then he was like, oh, I get it. It was a joke. And I was like, yeah, but she wrote like the way I read it really shows you like, holy shit, they can make you look like an insane person if you just describe it like the way you were describing some dude scarring your heart. I wouldn't say it
Yeah.
like that. I would say it like a guy had to open up my chest cavity, take my
Yeah.
heart, and then just shed it like a cheese on a grater to make sure that these
Right.
signals wouldn't reach my heart to cause me to have these issues. Like badassify it up, turn it into this
Yeah.
whole event where people start giving you flowers like you're a fucking make-a-wish kid. Like
Well, you're an attention seeker, buddy.
I have a big ego issue and people don't realize that. That's why I tell people don't give me compliments because eventually I just start like in the back of my head, just stroking like the cat on like a swivy chair where I'm just like, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Right. I have the opposite problem, man. I can't handle compliments. I hate them.
I see. Secretly love them, but at the same time, I know my ego issue is so big where I tell people don't give them to me, and I keep putting myself down on purpose. And people are like, you have
Hmm.
very bad like self esteem issues. I was like, no. It's just I once you let that door in, I'm like, is it better to have too many compliments or not enough? A lot of successors throughout history, they weren't the ones that's like, oh, well, thank you. If you turn into a Kevin Hart, you're kind of fucking yourself over. I mean, it might work in
Yeah.
today's society, but in the grand scheme of things, I don't think anybody should have that ego.
Yeah, right, right. I agree with that. Yeah. So I studied I was a psych major in college, right? And I remember learning about depression and anxiety, and those this mental health issues have always fascinated me. And going, I don't know, have you listened to the podcast I do with a couple guys?
Yeah.
So we take what we do. It's called. I don't mind if you. It just shameless plug just for a second.
Yeah. Go
It's
ahead.
called. It's called History Defeats Itself. There's three of us, and we rotate the person that did the research on a topic, and the other two don't know what we're going to talk about until we record. So basically, you can take a subject like I did anxiety once, and so we talk about the history of it. We talk about how they used to treat people that had mental disorders, anxiety, and all that shit, and then how society treats it currently, and kind of what we think the future is going to do, and find out if we defeated ourselves, or if we kind of learned from our past and are improving. So I always, anytime we take a subject and I'm the one doing the research for it, I'm always fascinated. I don't care if it's totally like a milquetoast subject. I always am interested in the psychological component of it,
Same.
because that's the part that drives me. I think that's what makes humans fucking crazy. We have this thing that we use between our ears that we analyze everything with. And it's crazy because just the study of psychology, we're using our brain to study our brain, which it's not like you're using your brain to figure out how your elbow works. You're using your brain to find out how your brain works. So and I remember learning about psychology and mental health issues and stuff. And like I said, it always fascinated me. And and I don't know if you've heard this before, but like if you suffer from depression, it means you're kind of living in the past and you're dwelling on the past. And if you suffer from anxiety, you're nervous and living in the future.
It's called future tripping is when you start worrying about problems that haven't occurred yet, like scenarios that might not even happen. You're too focused on I used to be like that when I was in high school. I used to worry about so many times, like I'd get very nervous in front of large groups of people. I'd always worry about something and it would cause major stomach issues and stuff like that. And I
Yeah,
don't
me
know.
too.
Eventually I just stopped giving a shit. Like it was the weirdest thing. It kind of came, I think, when I graduated. I mean, I was bullied I'm a big mental health guy as much as I talk about it. Like I'm supported all of that, but I'm
Uh-huh.
really obsessed with the fact that we're exploring space. If anything, we should be exploring our oceans. And before that, exploring the one thing that's inside of our head that we barely even have an understanding of what's happening with it. Like the fact of you can hit your head a certain way and experience foreign accent syndrome where you start speaking in a whole
Yeah,
different
right.
accent. Or there's a really good topic. So I used to be obsessed with how the brain worked, but at the same time, more of the mentally challenged side of things, because
Okay.
I believe that they see things in a perspective that we don't, on an aspect of they see the things that we neglect on a daily basis, such as a kid screaming blue, 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 and you're like, why the fuck is he going off about blue? It's because he's paying attention to the sky. He's actually noticing the colors around us. They're so much more vibrant in the eyes of someone that neglects them every single day, which is kind of why weed is kind of helpful, because you smoke it and
Mm-hmm.
you realize, oh my God, there's all these beautiful things that are moving around me. It's yeah, because you're so stuck up in your own head the whole time, you're not paying attention to the basic necessities like cold air hitting your lungs. And Willowbrook State School is a very good article you should look up. So, and this is how we show that history has not evolved. Of course, we're still testing on different people today, but this was a school back in the day when people didn't know what mentally retarded was. They
Mm-hmm.
what so there was this school where parents could just open up their door and let their kids just get out and never see them again. They would just drop these kids off at the school and never see them again. But it was an old army it was an old army hospital that they turned into a school. And what they would do is they were testing these mentally challenged kids with hepatitis, all these crazy ass things, and trying to see what the effects would be, just like Tuskegee, where we tested over there in that country. They were doing it in our own country at a place that was known as a high school. And you would see these pictures of these mentally challenged kids naked, shoulder to shoulder, 50 to a room. And they would just come in with a hose and spray them down. There'd be poop on the floor and stuff. And just reading that, you're like, We haven't evolved from that. Like, I just saw recently someone was complaining about how, what is it, India or some other country is now getting the vaccine first. And I'm like, we saw this, like, why is the vaccine going to low income countries first? Because it's like Tuskegee. It's not 100% a proof plan to fix it. There's some side effects you can experience. And we were just testing it in another country like we did way back in the day. It's nothing fucking new. But people are like, no, that's not happening. The vaccine's fine. I'm like, depends on what you're Googling, man. Cause now everyone's hating Google because they're blending results. And I'm like, it's just fucking weird to see how we're collapsing ourselves inside of ourselves. It's so nuts. Like, we're not moving forward. We're like staying the exact same. We're not going anywhere.
Yeah, well, I kind of feel like we are having issues where we don't know who to trust and why. And there's nothing wrong with having like a prism of information of doubt and denial coming through, or just question, right, what's being told to you. There's nothing wrong with that, but I think then we end up taking science and we slap it in the face and just assume that it's all bad. Like, I don't understand the backlash towards people wearing masks or Dr. Fauci, and like, how did this guy get to be 80 years old and have a perfect career his whole life, and like, this is what he's trying to have this evil crusade about, like making up a bullshit pandemic. Like, I don't understand the conspiracy theories catching, like, taking such a big momentum shift in our culture, in our society. I don't get it. I don't
It's a,
understand why
it's
we don't trust.
about to say it's a trust factor because I think the factor is when Fauci said all this stuff about a mask, and then it turns out he was just making sure that the first responders and the people on the front lines could actually get the other ones. That's where the trust got thrown out the door. Like, even though it wasn't a big deal, like, okay, you lied a little bit to people, but it wasn't like a huge lie, like telling them that like Santa Claus isn't real. That's a terrible one. But ever since you let that lie in, like, people already have a distrust for the government as it is based on like certain things that come out later. Like, did you see the new COVID bill? Everything in the COVID bill was releasing alien information. And that was at the start of January. But the newest one that just passed, not the one they were talking about in January, they did release the articles, but they were all redacted and shit. But the one they release now is, now they're not even saying it's a possibility. They're acknowledging it all. It seems like they're prepping you for a war with the amount of things that you're reading about. And it's like, they're not going to tell you everything. They're not going to, there's no way in hell. They're going to tell you whatever you want or whatever you think is enough, because I guarantee you extends 10 miles past what you think that's all they know. You know what I mean? They're
Yeah.
always going to keep some stuff secret. But it's an aspect of like, people don't know what to believe. And that's where conspiracy theories, that's where you got to be careful with. I believe a good portion of a lot of them are true, but then you got to cut the line off. Like, when it starts talking about like, they have a pesticide that you spray frogs and it makes the frogs gay. That is 100% true. There is a crop and that does change a frog's gender. But then after you say that, they go, and then Hillary Clinton, she's also a reptile. You're like, fuck it, stop it, draw the line, cut the line. Like, that's where we stop. But they don't want to
Yeah.
stop, because once you start uncovering these things that are being hidden, you start to think you don't know what to believe. And I believe with the fact of how social media has become now, even with history, a lot of that shit now, people are looking back with certain things. It's becoming false. It's becoming, is that true? Just the other day, like a week and a half ago, Twitter was trending Helen Keller isn't real, or Helen Keller was racist, because they saw pictures of her with Charlie Chaplin, and Charlie Chaplin shows the same mustache as a good old Adolf Hitler. And they
Yeah.
looked at that
Yeah.
saying
Yeah.
that she was racist or she didn't exist. And if you think about it, even though we have photographic evidence that Helen Keller doesn't exist, or it does exist, that she's in photos, you can think about why they would think that it wouldn't be true. Because let's say if you're in school, you're learning about Helen Keller, so a blind, deaf, basically all these types of things wrong with her, and she still overcame success, then you would look at your life and be like, then you can do anything because you have more than what she had. So you have no excuse. So it's like a push movement type thing. But then it makes the whole world schizophrenic, because now people don't know what to believe. You could take something somebody said and write it down, and it looks a whole different way. Like me and my one doctor when I talked about the ceiling fan.
Well, yeah, I think what you're saying makes sense, and because we have access to so much information, it makes everyone like an armchair expert, right?
Yeah.
It makes everyone feel like I can just do the research myself and form my own opinion, but they're not. I mean, you don't spend time in medical school, or if you're not a neuroscientist, you don't know exactly what's going on. And again, I think it's okay. It's okay for people to have critical minds and not swallow everything that someone's feeding you. You have to. I mean, if you look at the 60s generation, there were the original kind of like anti-establishment, and they questioned what was happening and knew what they were being lied to about when Vietnam came around. But we took this to um, a level of paranoia, and I I don't know. It's a weird slippery slope that catches momentum, and it seems like it's just too much for me sometimes. We actually did an episode on conspiracy theories once, and we talked about flat Earth society and all this shit. And like, I cannot believe how people would rather dream up something like that is true when there's photographic proof that the Earth is round.
Dude, don't
Like,
even get me started. I had a close friend of mine that we chatted for 3 hours, and it's an episode I don't know if he's gonna let me release, but he came out to me as a flat earther. And I was just sitting there like, I understand. See, the reason I talk to so many people, so I don't think there's answers on anything. But I've talked to astronomers, I've talked to people that study like space, everything, and I've seen the proof to it. But then I can't sit there and tell somebody that they're wrong. I can just look at their perspective and try and understand it from their point of view. Because I believe in life, there are no final answers, man. I believe what we call H2O, water. I'm that guy that's in the middle of the road that can't make a decision because I'm like, man, aliens, when they come down here, you think they're going to classify H2O as water? They might classify it under something else. You know what I mean? It's all our own interpretation. It's just like time. It's relevant to wherever you are, what time zones, they're all fucking man-made shit. Everything we have is man-made. People go, well, explain the Big Bang. I don't know. Explain God. I don't know. I'm saying I don't think anybody's wrong here. I think we're all doing as much as we possibly can to cope with the next thing. Because I actually what I found really funny was I looked I Urban Dictionary. I don't know if you've ever done that before.
mhm.
But I Urban Dictionary, just simple words, and it shows you the perspective of everybody that just understands what this word is. Some people joking and some people not. Some people giving actual evidence of stuff too. And it's like cancel culture, because some people say cancel culture doesn't exist, and some people, obviously creators like us, know it exists. But I had gotten into an argument about cancel culture, and there are points that are right about it. One, if it's, I think the internet, Twitter, all that stuff, we all think it's a community platform. It's really self-owned, private-owned property. So if somebody wants to ban you off of it, then 100% they have the right to. So I agree to that. But
Yeah.
it's funny, the definition of cancel culture is just a bunch of narcissistic psychopaths on social media who vilifies people to feel important. They always take the chance when given and stretch it as much as they can, as long as they can create a narrative that portrays people in a bad light, no matter the fucking context. Their intent is more about self-empowerment rather than resolving a problem, not actually giving a flying fuck whether people improve or not. What they want in the end is always useless fucking selfish prestige instead of thoughtful and considerate nourishment of other people. If you genuinely want someone to learn their mistakes, how about just holding people accountable instead of fueling your fucking worthless ego by causing more harm than they originally did? And that's just a random dude's interpretation of cancel culture. Then the next one's like cancel culture. It's when it's a culture and it gets canceled. And then there's another result. And you're like, you just see people all with like, I don't really have the effort to put energy into this. And then that's what I love. The Urban Dictionary is the best place if you're a mind fanatic or you like to see people's brains and how they work. That's the best place to go, because you'll see one serious answer, then a fake ass answer, then a serious answer, then a dude who's just venting. Then like I Googled Star Wars. Best
Yeah.
interpretation I've ever heard of Star Wars on Urban Dictionary was the epic story about the dysfunctional family of Skywalker. And I'm like, fucking thank
That's
you.
it.
That is the best. That is the
That's it.
exactly what the movie is. So I'm like, that is 100% perfect.
Yeah, right. It's pretty funny how people are able to nail stuff like that, right?
I look
It's
at like Twitter is the playground, just like Urban Dictionary is. You get to see
yeah.
minds work in ways you would have never even thought.
Oh yeah, completely. I love it and hate it. Like Twitter, I realized it was the most depressing fucking social media that I carried on my phone, and then I started following just a completely different group of people. I started following like absurdist comedians, and then I thought it was the greatest fucking platform ever because I love that shit. I love how people are still living in the same world that I'm living in, but now the focus is off of Donald Trump and all of the bullshit that kind of comes with him, and people just making stupid, I mean, just trying to make the most outlandish jokes, in however many characters they can, and it just makes me laugh
Well,
how it
here's
how it evolved like
they
that.
have that FBI case, and here's where the conspiracy thing gets kind of crazy because they have that FBI thing about the whole conspiracy theory idea was that they thought that they weren't going to open up the economy until Trump was out of office because they didn't want any of the praise going to Trump if the economy started to come back during the lockdowns and all that stuff. Well, it just came out that there's an FBI case going on now where they have evidence that there was a plan to open up the economy. Wait till after Trump is out of office so he didn't get any of the credit. And that's why like
Hmm.
people are joking on Twitter and stuff saying, well, I guess coronavirus really loves Kamala Harris and loves Joe Biden because they seem to like, we're seeing improvements and stuff in our economy now because they didn't want any of that to go to Trump. That's where the conspiracy stuff gets crazy. My whole thing was if you start focusing in on that, you start trying to find holes in everything. Like the QAnon shit is just fascinating to me. The fact that there's like people think that the world is a lot worse than it actually is. I was like, if you want your best representation of what the hell is going on in this weird ass world, look at politicians, man. I just saw the other day the equality bill was being passed. And
Hmm.
I usually never get into politics, but this was just so fascinating to me to show that how even in the minds of the people that we're appointing in our offices are fucking childish. Where the equality bill is being passed, the one governor put up an equality flag or something out front of her office, and then
Yeah, I saw that.
another one put up there are only two genders, male and female, and then posted it on her wall. And she was like, "Deal with it. It's science." And I was like, "You're a fucking child. Like you're doing that for attention. You know that's what
Right.
you're doing. It's like watching fucking reality television. You're watching to see because she wants to get a rise out of the other person." And then Twitter banned a certain post for the equality one and only showed the video of her putting up that sign. So then now they're looking at Twitter as being transgen phobic. And I'm like, why are we starting fights like this? This is the
Yeah,
dumbest shit. I'm not
it is the
understanding.
dumbest shit ever.
That's why I wanted aliens to be real because
Yeah,
that's
right,
what
exactly.
that's what it takes for all of us to unite against a common thing. It's like we need to set aside our differences, but
Independence Day.
we're shooting each other in the foot to fight over every single dumb little shit. Oreos just put up a thing about they said trans people do exist on their Twitter. No fucking shit. What are you talking about? What are we doing here? But it's like trying to show people that you wish support so they'll buy your product. And I'm like, oh my God, what we're giving ourselves schizophrenia. Why are we doing
Yeah,
this? Like people just want to fight all the time now. And I'm like, just have a conversation. I don't think people are inherently bad. I think a large amount of the people agree that we're all fucking people. Let people do whatever the fuck they want as long as they're not bothering me. But then people
that's right.
take it so far and then that's when social media is an issue because you don't have to use your name and then you can act like an asshole and a crazy person. Then there's it just never ends, bro. We're just gonna fucking turn into idiocracy where Terry Crews is our fucking president.
Exactly. I totally agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. That movie was was predicted the future pretty well, I think.
I just
Yeah, it's crazy, but I think, when you do have interactions with people, and that's why it's don't you think it's funny that podcasts right now are so popular because it does give you like a long form conversation where if it's an interview show or if it's any kind of show, it gives you an opportunity to find common ground with anybody. I mean, you and I seem to agree about almost everything we're talking about, but even if we didn't, look, I can look at you and you're saying something earnestly to me. And even if I disagree with that, I'm not going to tell you to shut up and you're fucking crazy because you're not spouting off hate or anything like that. But it
yeah,
gives us this opportunity. And on Twitter and all the social medias, it's just like, fuck you, cancel culture. You're out. You don't mean anything to me.
yeah. I mean, I try my best to be open minded and look at everybody's perspective of stuff too. But the whole reason why my show uses your real name, some people don't want to do that. Some people don't want to, like for instance, pseudonyms. People love fucking pseudonyms. Like people love to go as like I'm whatever Thug Life 20, whatever it is they want to call themselves. And I'm like, I not happening on my show because then you could just say outrageous shit you don't mean for views. And I'm like, if I wanted to watch a fake show, I would watch anything on TV. I would go out into the world because most of the world is like 90% fake. Nobody's acting like themselves. Nobody wants to be themselves. I'm like, I'm
Exactly.
legit trying my hardest here to make it authentic because I think that's what people need. That's why there's a fascination for Joe Rogan. That's why there's a fascination for talk shows and stuff, is people want to hear like they're in the room. But then there's the issue of like when they hear an old podcast of yours that's new to them, they immediately tweet at you something thinking because that's fresh to them, but it might be old for you. You might say like Trump's the best. And then next thing you know, they hear that. And then it's a month later after you said it and they're tweeting you like, what do you mean? And it's like, what are you referencing? Because they feel like they're in the room. That's part and parcel of why radio is so intimate. It's because usually you're by yourself, you're stressed out, you're dealing with something, you just have something on as background music, but it's letting somebody in. And I think the world needs a little bit more authenticity or a little bit more fun and stuff too, because like, man, it's everyone just wants to start a war. And I'm like, bro, we know this ain't good. Like, you can look through any of our history. Like, their idea now is that Plato wasn't a person. Plato was a pseudonym. And that's legit science. Like, I've talked to Greek historians. I've talked to people that have studied this type of ancient Greece type style arts, and they're starting to look at that. And I'm like, if history in the past, just like in your bio, if history in the past is a good predecessor to the future of like what actions we're going to end up digging up or probably doing over again,
Right.
Plato makes sense if that was a pseudonym, because everybody nowadays is either a fucking philosopher or a stand-up comedian. And I'm like, we've been in lockdown. Where are you performing? Where are you doing these acts? But
Right.
it's an
Right.
idea of not being yourself. So that would make sense if Plato was a pseudonym. People are running by pseudonyms now, but I'll tell people, if you come on my show as a pseudonym, I can't give you the credit. I'd be giving this person the credit. That's not you. Don't you
Mhm.
want if we're looking at a log 100 years from now and your family's like, types in what was my grandpa doing? You want them to find your work, not another thing, unless you're doing porn. But even then, I probably
Yeah,
still
right.
want my grandkids to find that.
It's something to be proud of. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And I don't know where the harm is if okay, you find out that Plato is not genuine, wasn't a genuine thing. Like I don't know if it's a ton of harm because it brought so much good and thought and like I think have opening up conversations for thought experiments and having disagreements and let's dive in deep if we have a disagreement. We are kind of talking about this before, and it's okay to disagree with each other. Just listen to each other and don't just diminish someone's. You just said a minute ago that you're very open minded towards where people come from. I'm really fascinated with that. Like, what led you to your opinion? Like, what happened in your life or your genetics that made you dig in on this opinion right now? So I welcome and I love having like these thought experiments where people have disagreements and they just kind of I don't know how people are so opinionated and when they learn about a brand new issue, they already know what side they're going to take. It's so crazy to me, and that happens so quickly. And that's probably where we have problems with politicians too, because we expect them to have answers right away or opinions right away. Give it a second to marinate and come up with why you believe the way you do, and let it evolve, let it change. You know, there's nothing wrong with changing your mind about something and thinking things through. We've all, hopefully, all of us have changed. I'm like, how old are you? You're like 22 years old,
23.
23. Okay, so I'm 50. I am a different person than I was at 23.
Yeah,
And you're gonna be by the time you hit 50, you're gonna be a different person too, and
I'm
for the
hopefully
better. Like
dead.
your life experience, yeah, your life experience informs who you become.
Yeah.
So give yourself the room to evolve. You don't have to have all the answers. Just be open. And like I think when you host a podcast, by nature the way you are is you're like receptive, you listen, and in listening to your episodes you give people a good chance to talk and you really listen to what they're saying. So that part I've really like enjoyed. So I kind of have some hope for the future where I'm hoping a lot of people of your generation are doing the same thing that you're doing.
Sadly, no. But it just comes to a concept of like my whole family. If you would usually when a person looks at another person, they look at it like, okay, you're probably a lot like your family. It's just common connections, genetic connections. You're looking at like at what's this person's environment is probably going to be how this person forms, which is most of the time, at least in psychology and stuff, you're looking at environmental influences, you're looking at genetics, certain variabilities. But from the start of the podcast to where I'm at now, just meeting so many different perspectives, I don't have my own opinion anymore. I have thoughts, I have different feelings and emotions, but even if I have a certain idea or thought that goes in my head, I also look at the others. Like I even with somebody could tell me water is H2O. I'm like, okay, well, what about the, and I would just, even though I agree, I still would toss in the other side because having that other point in there, it's a whole idea of, I don't think there are final answers to anything. And I think once you understand that, it makes you less apt to try and protect those. Like back in the day, using a pseudonym was an idea of protecting yourself from something that could get you, that could hurt you, somebody like a church or something that was going after you that wanted to lock you down. That's changed now. Using a pseudonym is now a way for you to be able to say something and have no reparations for your actions, which is horrible. But people
Hmm.
still do that. So it's like this whole shift in culture and this idea of what things are. Words don't mean the same thing they did 10, 15 years ago for good and bad reasons. Like, some words lost impact, and I also, where you're from, we talked off in the beginning about cussing. Australia, they have one
Yeah.
word where most people in America won't say that word because it immediately makes everybody's assholes clench up. It's all
Right.
it's all dependent on like, I think the times are changing, and to have a final conclusion on anything where someone could be like, "You're wrong, I'm not going to listen to you," then all you're doing is hurting yourself. Because I've been 100% about so many things, and then somebody has shown me a different side of things, and just understanding what that perspective is, honestly, it frees your soul a little bit because you just look at it like, well, that means I don't know. Do I have all answers to everything? What I want to know the answer to everything. I think that's the point of life is you want to talk to as many people as you possibly can. I wish more people would, but sadly the world's too much of a fire starter. Just like when I reached out to you, you could have been like, "What's this kid want? Why does he want me as a guest? Why does that?" It all becomes that defensive thing because not everyone's trusting when someone says they want to have a conversation, which is so weird to me.
And I remember I gave you my cell phone number. And you're like, "What the fuck are you doing, dummy?"
I was like, "Yo, I
You're
could be a psycho killer."
yeah, but like I already listened to some of your episodes, and I feel like I have a pretty good intellect or not intellect, but insight into people's personalities and stuff. And so like I like the way you conducted yourself on your interviews. So it's like, yeah, I'm gonna trust you with my phone number. That's all right.
I'm glad at least somebody's got some trust in me. You can have some people that are like, "I would not let you feed my goldfish like for a month if I was gone."
I mean, I did change it. I did
Oh,
change
well,
it.
there you go. There you go.
No, I'm just kidding.
But like, man, I think it's just important too, because like, even if you like, for instance, like with your podcast, even choosing a topic or studying more history, when you start learning, like I did that originally when I first started this podcast. I actually had a spinoff of this thing around the time I hit 50 episodes.
Uh-huh.
It was called Fill in the Blank. We stopped at like 30 something episodes, but I would ask my friends that were guests on my podcast. We're all sitting in my room or whatever, like on my couch or something. I'm like, what's a topic you're super interested in that I could study and we could talk about as an episode? And then my buddy was like 19th century Victorian surgery. I had buddies toss out like conspiracy theories, the history of food. And I just started learning and learning and learning and researching these topics. And next thing you know, it was you start learning that like, oh my God, the world really hasn't changed as much. The objects, the clothing, the technology might be different, but the morals, the ideas, the perspectives of like what are people's thoughts and choices of what are they going to go to are a lot of the same. Like we're back in the day in history, it might seem rough. Like, how could we do that stuff back then? Man, it might be a big difference between like 5 years in the past, 40 years in the past, 100 years in the past, seems like ages, but we're still following a lot of the same mistakes over and over and over again, and that's just the concept of we're just forgetting. We're writing down our history, we're recording history, but we're forgetting the progress that we're making with it, where we seem to be at this state of lull, staying in the same position 24/7. I mean, we're having more fights now than we did back in the day. At least back in the day, people knew like you had to survive. I think that is part and parcel of like it's too easy to survive today. I don't see a lot of people before the pandemic that were struggling a lot. And I think the pandemic being on lockdown and stuff just made people antsy in their pantsy when it came to, trying to find a fight to start up.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're 100% right. And I think like the way our history has been, I mean, as humans, we haven't evolved that much in the last couple hundred years. So right now, the only difference is just the access to information has changed dramatically. So I think we feel like our opinions are it's kind of funny because like the joke now is like not everyone needs a podcast, but I kind of disagree. I kind of disagree with that too because it's hard to get your podcast out there in front of a lot of people. But I think if you take the time to sit down and think about like just come up with a concept and think about what you want to share, there's nothing wrong with that. Like it's a constructive, even if you're just doing it for yourself, it's a constructive exercise to
It
kind of
just
go ahead and do.
it just gets scary because it's the idea that it is a game still. Not like I guess it more in the concept of like how you would look at like a jury appointment or like a court date or a court case or something. It's a game. There's a clear winner and there's a clear loser. A defender, there's a prosecutor. Same thing with podcasts. The idea is you want to get as much followers as you possibly can. It's the idea objective of fame. And I've listened to enough podcasts with famous people that are like, you don't want fame. And like hearing it, you're like, man, a lot of money sounds nice to buy you like awesome things, but it doesn't buy happiness. But at the same time, you hear the fame aspect of things, it always goes sour. People talk about like, I can't take a piss in public. I can't do anything in life anymore. I can't do anything I could do before that
Right.
I
Right.
would love and I would kill for. But it becomes a game. Like people say, I don't want any more podcasts out there because then next thing you know, they have competition. And a lot of people think of this as competition. Like you got these followers, they'll try tricks to steal your followers and stuff. Me, I'm doing it because I love it, dude. I mean, just
Right.
on the aspect of like, I consider this therapy. That's why I've started people's podcasts. I've helped their shows. I've helped them grow way past me, all because like, I can give if I can give you advice that you're doing something that is creative. You're doing something that I consider a form of therapy. That's why I have so many fucking episodes. Is I need a lot of therapy, but
Right.
it's
Right.
so fucking fun because if you would have asked me 3 years ago what were my thoughts were, I would have been like, yeah, I would have been so simple-minded, but now I've talked to so many people, I just feel like I've definitely aged beyond my years, and I'm like, anybody deserves a benefit from that. If you just talk to more people, you're not gonna be pissed off if some person says an animal slur. Like, did you know PETA and those animal things that I've been talking about it a lot, like in the past, like 10 episodes, is that they released a bunch of sayings you shouldn't say because they're animalist, which means like animal slurs. So instead of
You're gonna
saying,
hurt their feelings.
yeah, so instead of saying two birds, one scone, you have to say two no, it's kill two birds, one stone. It's now two birds and a scone. And it's like just the dumbest shit where I'm like, what are we doing? What are we doing here, man? Like it's bring
Who,
instead of bring
whose
home
feelings? Yeah, whose feelings are we protecting with that?
instead of bring home the bacon, it's bring home the bagels. And I'm like, oh, just fucking wait. Wait till the gluten-free community comes after you,
Yeah.
you
Right.
son
Right.
of a bitch.
Yeah. So stupid. Yeah.
Uh,
I feel like we've done it. I feel like we've conquered all of life's problems
Literally,
in this.
we force struggle onto ourselves. People fast. They starve themselves. We give ourselves struggle when back in the day people were fighting just to get an ounce of food, but now it's like I want to drop a couple lbs. Let me not eat for 3 days.
Well, I think it's human nature, right? I think human nature, we have to have a certain level of problems. And it's funny because you were talking about how like efficient and easy life is right now. So like my kids, I have 3 kids and their childhoods I consider to be way easier than what mine was. I mean, we have a way more harmonious home life than I did when I was a kid. But you give my teenagers a chance to bitch about what's going on and they're going to take it and run. And I feel like such an old man where I tell them, "Man, you would not believe what my dad would have done to me if I would have said that." And but it's fine. It's human nature. You know, we all have to have something that we love. We all have to have something that we grind against and feels like it oppresses us. And you know, how no matter how big or how small. And I'll go back to kind of what you were saying too. It's like you can't question someone else's perspective. Just listen to it and try and learn from it. And I mean, I think that there might be um, some absolute truths in life, but I don't know if they're physical things. Like I think that there are some truths, like as hokey as it sounds, like the golden rule is like an absolute truth. It's like you want to treat others the way you treat others the way you want to be treated. Like that's I think that's a good philosophy to live by. But as far as like objective truths, yeah, no, it's everything is coming through human eyes, right? And through our minds. So objective truth is kind of a rough one.
I
But
think
I do try to kind of defer to people's, and if people have opinions that consider to be completely outlandish, I just let them go off because it's like just because I'm listening doesn't mean I have to necessarily agree. But it's
well, even
I think it's fun.
yeah, even if someone has a different perspective, like if somebody says something, you're like, "That's insane," and you're an asshole for thinking that. Even if
Yeah.
you said that to them, you think that's gonna change their view? Like, that's
No.
just gonna make them if
No
you're
way.
like me, you have a problem with authority. I have a huge
Yeah.
problem with authority where someone's like, "Why don't you do this?" And it's like, "Well, I'm not gonna do that because you just told me to do that." Like, you have to ask me, you have to be polite with it. Like, I always do the dishes, and somebody, "You did the dishes." I'm like, "Yeah, but like, but you didn't put them away." I'll fucking lick every dish and throw it right back into the dishwasher. Like, I I just it's I don't know what it is. I like to be treated at the same level, and I believe everyone should have that goal in their mind is even if you're not going to be super nice to a person or super mean, just treat them like a normal person. Nobody in my mind is lower than me. I'm the
Yeah.
lowest on the scale because like I said, ego issue. I focus on that and I know I have one. So the best way is to make sure I raise everybody up higher than me. I care more about people than I do myself. And I think not everyone has to do that, but it really kind of levels you in a way because I feel like most of the time people have their noses held up high or they just have a disinterest in other people. And I'm like, you're losing the battle here. The main battle is like we're a community. That doesn't mean anything when you consider yourself an individual and not a part of it. Doesn't mean you need to do neighborhood watch and shit. But, I think in the grand scheme of things, if my house starts burning down, if I'm friends with people, if I'm, if people know who I am, they're going to be more than willing to help me out rather than be all alone. You hear a lot of people say, like,
Yeah.
I was alone on the streets. Yeah, because you kept isolated to yourself. I mean, we're meant to be people. Like we're literally meant to talk and interact with each other, but not through social media, but through, more intimate ways of like having a baseball game to go to, having like something where you can sit down and have a chat. When you roll up into a bar and somebody's watching football and says, "Oh, fuck this," and it's like, "All right, yeah, fuck them. And, it creates that camaraderie. There's a reason why there's that there. It's meant to boost relationships and even make time fly by faster, not twittering and getting into certain Twitter groups where people are just arguing back and forth about the color of Ryan Reynolds' hair. Oh, it's blonde. Well, no, it has highlights. It's like, shut the fuck up. Where are we at in the time where that's a big issue right now?
Right. It is pretty majestic though.
It is.
He's a
That
good
dude's
looking
a
dude.
fucking treasure.
He is. He is. Yeah. I mean, that's like I've always thought that in life too. That like the most important thing to key on is human relationships. That's like all. That's a secret to life. Is is your relationship with other people because that's all we're here for as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
It's not things or objects, it's experiences. And the best way for any experience is to have it shared. Rock concerts, comedy, stand-up comedy, listen to whatever it is. There's nothing wrong with doing something by yourself every once in a while, but it's human relationships, interactions.
My prediction, and I'm going to say it here because I did a podcast, I think it was episode 703. We were talking about cancel culture, and he's a good friend. He's actually going to have to come back on and eat a hat. Um, because that was the bet. I said, I bet you I can find something. Because he was like, people don't just say things without evidence behind it. And I was like, I could pull up 20,000 tweets that tell me if you drink Pepsi, you're racist. And he goes, no fucking way. So on air, I pulled up tweets about people. And it was true. There's a lot of tweets. 2017 was the year exactly. Apparently, they did an ad with a bunch of cops at these riots and they would give them a Pepsi. And then people called that a racist Pepsi commercial. But so he's got to come back on and eat a hat. But I was like, when we were talking about this whole thing, it's like you got to understand that like social media, the amount that somebody can just say something without having like they're not using their real name and stuff. It's an issue. And I think more people want to be positive with each other. We want to build ourselves up, actual connections like this, being able to chat. And nobody's like, paying or doing anything like that. It's like that was the whole thing of the explaining this point was a conversation. Because when I say
Yeah.
interview or something like that, it turns into this question-based thing. And it's like I
Right.
legit just want to talk and we'll see where it goes, have a ride, and for a lot of people, that's not an ability to have, but it's not super hard. I mean, even if it takes pauses, if it takes whatever, just
Yeah.
being there and actually giving a shit, it's so freaking easy. And so I'm calling this in the future, maybe next 5 years or so. I think, or not even 5 years, maybe the next year. I think we're going to see a big pushback with social media. I think with the amount that Australia banned Google, Facebook's getting banned in some places. Twitter is now looking like people are going to start canceling that because now you have to pay for it. I'm like, we're going to start seeing a lot of people try and do strikes and protests against social media platforms and then not want to come back once they've been off for so long. Like it's going to be this like, I don't really need that anymore. Like after you drink or stop something for 30 days, you kick the habit.
Yep. Yeah. I like it. I mean, I think maybe then maybe we are correcting, and we don't have to be that pessimistic about our future. Maybe we are going the right direction.
I think it's
I
it's
hope.
it's a shift, man. It's like there could be one little butterfly thing that could just knock us right
Yeah.
back onto the downhill again. But I'm hoping people start looking at things a little bit differently. I think a lot of what sucks is like you see a lot of people like call themselves a philosopher and they're saying something and they're like it's the best wisdom of the years. I'm like, stop thinking in that mindset. Like, because that person has had that same thought probably in another place. There's been another person's had a same thought, same thought. Everybody said the same shit, but everybody's coming on it at different times. And I'm like, stop thinking that you're a Gary V and be a Gary Wee. Fucking that was a dumb, corny ass thing, but it fucking worked. I don't care. Uh, but it was an aspect of like everyone's thinking that on the same basis. I've talked to so many people. I can tell you we're all thinking the same. What is the fucking end game here? Why are
Yeah.
people doing this? What are the issues? We all think it, but
Yeah.
it's just not something that people ever talk about because trying to get into a conversation with someone, it's like a hit or miss. Did I sink this person's battleship? I don't know.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah, no. That's why podcasts are so important. I think that's why it's so much fun, and the fact that they're growing in popularity during this time is amazing to me because it's counterintuitive. But it's been nothing but like our experiences on our podcast have been nothing but favorable. The only part that's been frustrating is social media, and that's something kind of not to dive into like a new kind of thing, but it doesn't matter what kind of creator you are at this point. If you're any kind of artist, if you're an actor, singer, whatever you're doing, it's kind of weird that you have to be such a strong. You have to be a social media expert too, and that's so strange to me. You can't just write a book or you can't write a play or movie or whatever it is. You have to jump in there and be able to kind of form this huge following,
It's a
so
presence.
that way you get looked at. And it's like maybe I'm really good at podcasting, but I'm super shitty at attracting a big flow of people, a following on social media. That
That
might not be a strength of mine,
that could
and it's
be
fucked.
that could be a part of it. It's funny. There's an astrophysicist named Avi Loeb. He was on Joe Rogan, and he had
Hmm.
a theory about like this giant meteor or comet thing we had in the sky. They couldn't call it a comet because a comet has an ice tail, which is like the little sparkles you see flying off the end of it. That's ice. There was none of that, and it couldn't be a meteorite because there wasn't any signs that ice had already been there. So actually, they put out an article that it was actually a messenger from an extraterrestrial colony. It's why it was so like pencil shaped perfectly. And people are like, that's a message from an extraterrestrial colony. Scientists, everybody had already said that was it. That's why there's this COVID builds coming out about these aliens and shit. But the guy,
Okay.
Avi, who passed this study, he was like, everyone can prove me wrong because I have no social media. He has no social media. He had to go on a Joe Rogan podcast that it was set up from a friend of his who has his phone number, no social media at all. He goes, so they can call me crazy and I have no way to defend myself. I have no way to get this thing out there. I have no way to do this, no way to do that. I only publish the thing and then people have to go on the Harvard website and find it themselves, which people aren't going to do. They want to see it on social media. They want to see it on Twitter. They want to see it on
Right.
this. So he's been right for so long and people are proving him wrong, but they're not actually showing facts. They just have their side and people are reading their side first and not reading his. When it turns out his is the correct one. His is the one we're looking at that's like he's actually right about a lot of this shit, but he has no way to promote it because he doesn't have social media. So I'm like, it doesn't even matter if you have the shittiest podcast in the world. If fucking yeah, you could have a billion more followers. It's just an
Right.
aspect of like, how much do you want to spend your life being sucked into fucking social media? That's why I post and ghost, man.
Yeah.
I can't spend all day messaging back and forth. I had a dude
Right.
messaging me
Right.
the other day, like 30 messages back to back. And I'm like, I messaged him like, this is one of my gears, bro. Like you're grinding my gears. I can't
Yeah.
spend all day in this thing. I got really addicted at one point where I was just scanning the follower count. And then I took a break for a month and I realized how fucking ridiculous it is. I want to
Yeah.
go out and do shit. I want to have fun. If I want to talk to people, I'll message one day for guests and then I'll wait for them to message me back. But I'm not going to keep scrolling and fucking scrolling. It's just I'd rather play Dragon City. That game is way fucking fun.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. Well, speaking of fun, this has been a lot of fun, man. I've enjoyed meeting you and talking to you and getting a little look in your head. It's a little scary in there.
Dark demon thoughts. But Greg, dude, it's been awesome chatting with you, man. Please promote your podcast one more time. Let people know where they can find it, all the platforms.
Okay, it's called History Defeats Itself. It's available wherever you get your podcast. We just got picked up by the Sonar Network, which is a Canadian-based network, and they kind of emphasize their shows are all about comedy and arts and stuff. It's all fun, good stuff. And we're their first American podcast. I myself am Canadian, so I think maybe that helped them help them pick on or get our show going. So, but it's been a lot of fun, and we have a lot of fun. We don't take ourselves too seriously. We're not historians, so when we're just doing kind of like the quick little trip down through the internet, and we're just bringing up topics that we find fascinating and try to learn a little bit and have fun. So yeah,
Well, I'll make sure
history defeats itself.
I'll make sure I link it all in the description. I thank you, Greg, for being on this episode of Out of the Blank podcast.